with Nicole. Conversations with Nicole. Let's talk about it. Tell me all about it. I'm here. I wanna know what's on your mind. Ooh, the world needs to hear from you, and I'm so glad to have a conversation to reach the nation. And it's all about you. We'll help each other to discover innovative ways to positively change the world. Let's talk about. Let's talk about. Let's talk about conversations with Nicole.
Greetings. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. I am Nicole Everett, your host, and Conversations with Nicole is a talk show based in Tallahassee, Florida, focused on connecting the community through conversations. And today is what I call Wellness Wednesday. Wellness Wednesday is an opportunity for you, me, and my guests to talk about whatever it is we want to talk about. And today we are tackling the topic of trauma, the epidemic of trauma, and we are going to interrupt the epidemic of trauma via nonviolent communication. My very special guest is Dr. Cindy Bigbie, who we so lovingly call Dr. B. I am a fan of the Bigbie Method of nonviolent communication, having been part of her cohort back in the fall of 2021. And so I am super excited and delighted to have her here with me tonight with all of you. So we want to hear from you. Before I bring her on, before I read her bio, we want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from? We are live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and this is interactive. So we fully expect to hear from you. We want your comments. We want your questions in the comments. So feel free to engage with us tonight. So I see Miss Judy Light is on with us already. Happy that this conversation is being held. Yes, Judy, thank you for being here. Please tell folks to join us. Please like, please share, please invite folks to be part of this conversation. Says she is tuning in from a visit to Gainesville. Okay, wonderful. Well, we are glad to have you nonetheless. Thank you so much. I see you, Miss Jeanette, down in Miami Gardens, Florida. Mr. Jerry, DJ Groove, Tallahassee checking in. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Listen, you all want to be a part of this conversation because Dr. B is a NVC. That's our acronym for nonviolent communication. She is an NVC guru. And for those of you who may not be familiar with what NVC is, we're going to talk more about that. And I'm sure you will be just as intrigued as I was about it when I first heard about it. So while the rest of you are joining us, I'm going to go ahead and read Dr. B's bio. Dr. Cindy Bigbie, America's communication coach, is president of the Bigbie Method, an award-winning trainer, consultant, and speaker. She created the Bigbie Method to address America's trauma epidemic. Dr. Bigbie has dedicated her career to bringing restorative practices in nonviolent communication, NVC, to all segments of society. In 2019, she won the Dennis Maloney Award for Youth-Based Community and Restorative Justice Programs from the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice. She holds a PhD in Instructional Systems Design from the Florida State University. Any Knowles in the house? Her newly published book, My Link to Mildred, Interrupting the Epidemic of Trauma via Nonviolent Communication, has been designated an Amazon bestseller. So we are on with a best-selling author here. So you all help me welcome Dr. Cindy Bigbie. Yay!
Thank you, Nicole.
You are welcome. Welcome, Dr. B. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. It's late for me, but I'm going to hang in with you. I'm going to
Okay,
hang in.
well,
I'm very, very happy to be here, and it's my favorite thing to talk about.
indeed.
Feeling blessed.
Appreciate you so much for being here. So, for those who may not be familiar with you, I always ask my guests, who are you? Not what you do, but who are you?
Hmm. Who am I? That's a
Mm-hmm.
really good question. Who am I? Um, I guess I'm a peacemaker, bottom line. I remember as a young child thinking, as weird as this may sound, I remember like as a kid thinking about like what war is and how weird it is on some level,
Mm-hmm.
because and just and then uh, going to places where you sing "Let there be peace on earth," and I remember thinking to myself, "And let it begin with me," right? And I remember thinking to myself, I don't even know how to do this for myself, so we're kind of screwed out there. Well, I want this so badly, and I still can't live in full integrity to having the peace that I want internally until I found NVC. Really, not that I'm always in you have a peaceful space, but I think NVC is my anchor. It's actually a tool to constantly bring myself back to that. So yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm a peacemaker. I'm a mother of two daughters who are grown now. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've been married for a long time, and I'm a Tallahassee lover. I live in Tallahassee, and I love my community.
Indeed, indeed. I feel like I'm a peacemaker as well. So you're in good company tonight, Dr. B.
I could see that.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks for sharing that. We have Patty Razak Hani. Oh, I'm about to kill your name, Patty. I'm gonna just call you Patty R from Boynton Beach, Florida. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So, um, I guess, give a little bit of insight on MVC in terms of, just kind of briefly how you got introduced to it and what you do with it in terms of the Bigbie method.
Okay. Can I first start just by saying that there's a lot of people don't like the name of nonviolent communication
Mm.
and think that it can be off-putting
Uh,
because, a lot of people hear the term nonviolent communication and we think of violence as like people, physically hurting one another and beating up on one another. And so most people hear it and think, this isn't for me because I'm not violent, right? We don't think of it in that way. Nonviolent communication more or less grew out of Gandhi's term of nonviolence. And Dr. Marshall Rosenberg is the person who developed nonviolent communication. He was a clinical psychologist. And basically, NVC is used, or violence is considered any time that there's disconnection between you and another human being is a form of violence under this term. And so if you think about all the different ways that we have disconnection in our society, in our community, in our lives, then NVC can be applied in so many different arenas, right? And it's basically, it is a process to come back to communication, to be able to, the whole intention of it is if you want connection. So I just wanted to share that right off the bat because I think a lot of folks might think, well, yeah, NVC, not for me, right? I
mm,
actually find that it's for everybody because I don't know anybody in this world that doesn't experience disconnection at one point or another. And your question, I guess, is how I got into it. Is
mhm.
that the question?
Yes.
Oh gosh, that's not an easy thing to answer. Um, uh, I got involved in a political movement many, many years back to have a United States Department of Peace. And at the time, the folks that were running the whole campaign up in Washington, D.C., they wanted those people on the ground. I was the district representative for that here in Tallahassee. And they wanted people on the ground to kind of go about doing peace differently than maybe what was done in the 60s, because people that were advocating for peace, sometimes it got violent, right? So they
Mhm.
wanted us to actually be the bill, like walk the walk, talk the talk. And so they partnered with the Center for Nonviolent Communication to help school those of us on the ground how to show up, especially if people are not saying things that we enjoy, or not in agreement with us. How do we show up in a way still being able to forge connections? So that was my first foray into NVC. And long story short, I loved it so much after having many different experiences with it. And when my daughter was a senior at Rickards High School years ago, I was trying to think of what I could give my daughter and all of her friends, who I love so much, as a gift for graduating. And I thought the thing I could give them would be NVC. Like, if I could teach these kids this process before they go out into the world, then I'm really giving them a gift. So I approached the principal at the time of Rickards High School and said, "Hey, I'm really would love to teach a 4-credit class here. You don't have to pay me. I just want to do it." So we set that up, and I taught a 7th period class at Rickards High School, and that was the beginning, the beginning of all of this. Because when you teach something, that's your best way of learning it, obviously. So it forced me to own it. And one last thing I'll say about that is, if you want to really learn NVC, I say this all the time, but it's so true. Teach it to your kid and then have to go home and live with your kid, right? It
Right.
really forced me to be in integrity with this process, because it went against everything that I ever learned growing up, right? I couldn't be out of alignment and then go in on Monday and teach the class. So it really
Right.
forced the issue for me to have to apply it and be in integrity with it myself.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, we'll get more into what NVC actually is and does. But before we do, I definitely want to acknowledge a few more folks that have joined us. One being my mother, who is tuning in from South Florida. Thank you for being here, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Yes, Miss Bernicia Hires, who was our guest on Monday, who's a clinician here in Tallahassee. Thank you for being here, Bernicia. And Miss Isis J, who is a clinician in Arkansas. Thank you for being here, Isis. Appreciate you. So, if I didn't know what NVC was in terms of having participated in your training, I would be intrigued in terms of wanting to know more. So tell us a little more in terms of what NVC does.
Okay. What does NVC do? Well, like I said, it's used when you want connection. And I like to usually when I teach a class, I ask people, what does it even mean to connect, right? That seems like a very abstract term, connection. And I have massaged a definition over the years, which is that connection is the energy that exists within and between people when they experience being seen, heard, and valued without judgment, right? And that first part of the definition is kind of abstract, but the second part, being able to be seen, heard, and valued without judgment, that's the concrete, replicable part of this process. NVC allows us to really make that come alive. So putting in processes where people truly experience, like a lot of times when we're in company with folks, we say we want to be heard, or we're setting up, situations to be heard. NVC really does put in processes where people experience being heard and without judgment. And it really does, there's a lot to it around breaking down what is judgment. Because most people, we don't want to be judgmental in our communications. We really attempt when we're having communications to leave that out of it. And in NVC, you get real clear on, there's a whole bunch of judgment when we speak. Even what I just said actually was a judgment, right? It's almost near impossible to keep it from the conversation. And it's really important when it comes to the trauma thing, by the way, right? Because people that have had trauma, which by the way is at least 2/3 of us from what the data show, is that, people need safety. And in order to have safety, emotional safety, they need to experience that they're okay. And in order to do that, you got to take judgment out of the interactions. Like, that's the key right there. being
Mm-hmm.
able to keep it real emotionally safe for people, and not in a kind of touchy-feely way, in a very like, concrete, this is what I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you how to do this so that you can replicate this everywhere, and so that we can for sure have safety everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Safety is huge for human beings, and fight, flight, or freeze, are some of those reactions when we aren't in a safe place, right? And
Yeah,
so, hmm
what I was going to say is, and what people don't realize is how often that's actually going on for us.
yeah,
I mean, if you think about 2/3 of us have had trauma, so 2/3 of our brains are wired to be on that. Am I safe? So
mm,
one little comment like, you're late, you're always late, and the person that just delivered that thinks that's a real thing. Actually, that's a judgment. So a
mm,
person that receives something that seems so benign, you're late, you're always late, boom, fight, flight, freeze, just from something, and then the person that delivered is like, I don't know what their problem is. I'm just expressing myself. I'm just being honest,
mhm,
without them even realizing, oh, well, you just delivered an evaluative statement to this person, and they're receiving it in fight, flight, freeze, as they're not okay. And then they probably say something back, and more than likely that person is having a trauma response, all unconscious. This is what's happening, being played out amongst so many of us throughout our day.
right, right. So let's unpack uh, this epidemic of trauma. I mean, what you just said was a good example of, I say good example, but I think a notable example of how simple, how something that we may think is a factual comment can be triggering, right? And can cause somebody to be in a or feel like they're in an unsafe place or have a safety issue.
Mm-hmm. With
Mhm.
and not even really know that that's even going on,
Correct.
right? That's the other part of this. Um, you made mention of my book, which I do want to put a plug in.
Yes,
Um,
please plug
Here's
the
my
book.
book. I just published it May. Actually published it. A little background on the book. My Link to Mildred is the name of the book. Mildred, right? It's hard to point. Right here is my great grandmother on my mother's side. This is my mother. There. This is my mother.
Mhm.
And my mom passed away a year ago in May 5th. And when she was in her transition period, she asked for me to, well, she didn't really ask, she told me to write this book.
Mm,
And I had the name of this book for 25 years. Honest to God, I had the name of this book, My Link to Mildred, for 25. I always knew I was going to write a book, and this
mm,
book. And then when my mom passed, I think it was within 4 or 5 days, I just started waking up real early. I didn't make myself wake up. I just would wake up, come on in here into the office, and just start writing. And it literally poured out of me. It was pretty much written within 2 to 3 months.
wow.
Um, and My Link to Mildred, here's the connection to the whole trauma thing. I came up with this title, like I said, 25 years ago, when it dawned on me, oh, I can trace my trauma. Like I know, how Mildred was more or less kicked out of her country, came over to the United States when she was 11 by herself, not knowing any English, and how her life turned out. And then her son, who's my grandfather, how he ended up as a result of how she came over here, and all the trauma that he experienced, being brought up in orphanages, turn of the century. And then the way he imparted that trauma to my mother, in what I would call an abusive household. And then right down to me. My mom was not physically abusive, but definitely she had a lot of violence coming out of her at times.
Hmm.
And I can see like that lineage in my own behavior. In like the way I put it is like I can trace my crazy. I
Oh
can
wow.
trace my crazy. And in a way, I'm very fortunate that I can actually see how I show up in circumstances and
Mhm.
really trace it to Mildred, my link to Mildred, there are a lot of people that don't have that, that are not that fortunate, right?
Right.
I mean, here, just to be, people that have lineage related to slavery, so much of the history is broken,
Yeah.
right? And I talk about in the book about something that I came across called decontextualized trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is like, that's the same thing that I just said is happening in our interactions. I can trace it, but a lot of people, like when they're showing up in this way, they
Mm-hmm.
have no idea. There's no connection to the history, no ability to really trace how that lineage came down.
Yeah.
And yet it still is. It still is. And so it's misread often.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
our schools, it's misread,
Yeah.
right? When kids are showing up in certain ways, they're having that fight, flight, freeze response.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually the adult in the room also is having a fight, flight, freeze response, and they don't know it. Neither of them know it. They just think this is a bad kid, it's a crazy kid. They're acting a certain way without putting it in it's decontextualized trauma is what it actually
Mm-hmm.
is.
Whew. Wow. That's heavy. Just the thought of that. I don't, and so I want to hear from the viewers, just to pause and see if anyone is familiar with what Dr. B has just mentioned, or has had an experience like what she has described. I see Beverly Toombs is joining us. Thank you for being here. Beverly is an occupational therapist here in Tallahassee and has also been a guest on the show. So if you all don't mind, again, this is a safe space for us to communicate with one another. But if you have, if you're familiar with the concept of decon,
Decontextualized trauma.
decontextualized trauma, let us know, because it was a new concept for me when talking to Dr. B about that. Just that we the idea that we don't know where the trauma comes from or can trace it back.
Mhm,
um and so we just kind of don't have a clue in terms of why we are behaving the way we are.
mhm.
Hmm.
And while we're waiting to see if anybody has a question or a comment about that, um, you know, I've been on a kind of a mission in the last several years because I want to get this work of nonviolent communication to as many people as possible, but I really, really want to have it in our schools,
Hmm.
because when we talk about like the school to prison pipeline issue, right?
Hmm.
Kids that are getting in trouble in school are the ones that end up in our juvenile justice system, right? Unfortunately. And
Hmm.
it could literally start with one interaction. Like that's, I see it all the time where an adult, a kid is having a moment, and an adult is responding without NVC.
Hmm.
Would respond in the way that I would have responded to my kid way back in the day, right? Because I just didn't know differently. Whereas if you are given these tools, you have a whole different way of, number one, recognizing what's going on and then responding to what's going on. In that connection is built, right? And once you have connection with a kid, they're like putty, you pretty much, they're willing to do anything when there's actual, real, honest connection. So
Right.
I am fortunate because here in Tallahassee, we have started doing a lot of training in schools. We are, like, I think into starting in year 3 or 4 at Success Academy. The relatively new principal there is making
Okay.
NBC, excuse me, Success Academy Second Chance, an NBC based school. And
Mm.
some of the preliminary data that we have for teachers that have been trained versus ones not is already like crazy when you look at like numbers of referrals being given or
Mhm.
not, right?
Right. So, Beverly had a question. She wanted to know, is nonviolent communication more prevalent in families where verbal communication is difficult?
Well, I don't think it's really prevalent anywhere at the moment. I would really, or you're saying, um, yeah, I'm reading you. Yeah, I don't think it's prevalent anywhere yet. I think it's slowly growing, and Marshall Rosenberg did pass away. I don't even know how many years ago now, but there's more and more certified NVC trainers happening all over the world.
Mhm.
But is it applicable only, or is it best only for families where verbal communication is difficult? I don't think so. I think it's helpful in any circumstance where you have people coming together, even people that think that they have really good communication skills. I see, and probably Nicole, you're one of them. If I had to guess, when you
Yeah.
came in, when you came into my class, my guess is, and I'm guessing you do have what people would consider really good communication skills, which, by the way, is a judgment, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but I'm guessing when you came into my class, it was a lot very eye-opening.
It was very eye-opening. So I'm gonna share just a little bit, with the viewers, a little bit of what we work with in NVC, and that is our needs and our feeling sheets, okay? And so this is our sheet of needs, and this is our sheet of feelings. And so they are subcategorized. I mean, the feeling sheet, there are like 10 kind of main categories, but there are many other words under each category. So, for instance, just to give you a for example, all right, so there's a category that is sad, okay? But the words underneath sad are lonely, heavy, troubled, helpless, gloomy, overwhelmed, distant, despondent, discouraged, distressed, dismayed, disheartened, despairing, sorrowful, unhappy, depressed, blue, miserable, dejected, and melancholy.
Yeah, can I say a little something about that?
Sure.
Two things. It's probably a little more than a little something. Two things about that. One is um, there is some research. I think the word given to it is granularity. Like
Mhm.
when you can get that granular on what you're actually feeling, like so under that list of sad, they have all these granular, nuanced ways of experiencing sadness that actually pulls you into the higher level part of your brain. Like the
Mhm.
more you're able to really specifically name exactly your feelings. So that also leads into like how you can move from fight, flight, freeze. That amygdala, the primitive part of your brain, when you start to move into NVC, it's science based, like how you literally go into the more rational part of your brain when you can start
Mhm.
to deeply name your feelings. So that's one reason why it's interesting for you to read that off. The other little lesson that I just want to throw out there, and I think is probably the biggest takeaway. There's so much to NVC. For me, it's a lifelong journey. You don't just learn it and then boom, or get it in a few days. You stay in the game with it, right? But the biggest takeaway about NVC is this idea that all conflict is a tragic expression of an unmet need. That's it. No matter what someone is saying, they're really trying to express what we call universal human needs, which is what is on the other side of the sheet of paper that she showed you, right? So we've never learned that in a conversation, or a conflict situation, to be able to identify, oh, it's about this need. Let me explain. Let me say this need, right? And that feelings, when we get real clear on what's going on for us internally, the feelings, they're just pointers. Like when you're feeling good, when you're feeling things that you enjoy, it's just a pointer to, oh, I've got needs being met. What needs are being met in this moment? Or when
Mhm.
you're feeling lousy, some things that you don't really enjoy, it's just about, hey, I have some needs that are not being met. Let me identify those and then communicate them. But we don't do that. Typically, we get very caught up in strategies to
Yeah.
get our needs met. And in NVC, what we try to do is we really try to differentiate between what is a strategy and what is a need.
Mhm.
And we eventually, there is a place for strategy, but most people, when you're communicating, especially when you're in a conflict, you move to the strategy initially without ever even recognizing what the need is at hand. And Marshall used to say, if you can identify the need, we share the needs in common. So now we have a place to start, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's lots to it.
There is lots to it.
Mhm.
Um, we're about halfway through our conversation, so I'm gonna just pause for one moment. And for those of you who may be just joining us, I'm on with Dr. Cindy Bigbie, the author of uh, a book regarding, yes, my link to Mildred, but interrupting the epidemic of trauma via nonviolent communication. So we're talking all things MVC. For those of you who may not be familiar with MVC, it deals with thoughts and feelings and needs. And you said being seen and heard without judgment.
Mhm.
Right. Being seen and heard without judgment. You just said something too about all conflict being a result of an unmet need.
All conflict is a tragic expression of an unmet need. That's
Yes.
probably the number one takeaway, and usually a pretty big aha.
Mm-hmm. It is. I just want us to marinate on that for just a moment.
Mhm.
All conflict is a tragic expression of an unmet need. Think about that.
Well,
Is that something that we all can agree on, viewers? Let me know in the
and
comments.
and when we're talking about needs, I think sometimes people are it's uncomfortable using the
Mhm,
word need. What
mhm,
I'm talking about here is universal human needs. Some things that everybody in the world wants, like love, peace,
mhm.
friendship, kindness, security, safety, equality, freedom, interdependence, right?
Yes.
There are many of them. Well-being, abstract, one-word concepts that everybody in the world really wants these things.
Mhm.
Fun. Underneath every conflict, it's one of those, at least one of those.
Yeah, yeah. On that need sheet, for those of you who are tuning in, there are 3 large headings or meta categories is what it's called. Well-being, expression, and connection, and then there are 9 subcategories of core needs. And so part of MVC, there's a guessing of what your need may be.
Mhm.
And the idea behind that is for you as the person who is being asked about what your need is, to really kind of hone in on what you're lacking or what your need is.
Mhm.
And so the person who's asking, it's not so important that they really even get it right, but it gets you to think about what I need in this moment.
Yeah. When
Mhm,
you think about how that plays out, that could play out in many different scenarios. You're in a neutral situation with a friend that's talking about stuff, or you're actually in an argument with someone. We don't pivot there. We usually use all these other ways of interacting. In a
mhm,
neutral situation with a friend who's having an issue, we might give advice or relate or one up or,
mhm,
console. Or if you're in an argument with someone, some of the other conversations we might do is explaining or correcting or blaming, right? But
mhm,
it's very rare that we just start with, hey, is this something about you wanting some peace in the circumstance? We very rarely just pivot. And what you find is like when you do that, the person is almost like stopped in their tracks because we haven't learned to do that. And that's really
mhm.
all they want to be heard about is the need, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. All right, I see a couple of others who have joined us. My girlfriend Susan, who's in Virginia, thank you for being here, and Miss Doris
Hi, Doris.
Strong, who is here in Tallahassee, thank you for being here. So, ooh, I get so just caught up in MVC because it, like you said, we think that we are quote unquote good communicators, but MVC definitely causes you to slow your conversation down, to really take stock of observing and identifying feelings and needs. And so it's it's intense, but it's challenging for me, but I enjoy the challenge. I really do. I really do.
I'm curious if I can ask you a question.
Sure.
I'm curious, like what was one of the big things that was aha for you when you were taking the class?
Oh my goodness. Um, I don't know if I have my book. I'm looking to see. Oh, I think I do right here. It was the conversation around thoughts and feelings
Mm, mm,
and
mm,
how we tend to merge them.
mhm.
I'm a because after this particular session, I was like preaching this to everywhere I went. I was talking about these thoughts and these feelings.
Mhm.
Like that was the biggest thing for me.
That's a huge aha for many people too. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because 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 you're very into mental health, right? Like that's your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I and most people do get our thoughts and our feelings confused.
Yes.
They're two internal responses and we confuse them. When you say, I feel like you're not listening to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a feeling. That is a thought. I am
That's
thinking that you're not listening to me, right? We've couched it now in a feeling, but it's not a feeling, right? And oh, by the way, that's a judgment too, right?
mhm.
It's a judgment. So then you say that to someone, and then the person that gets it, they receive it, they get upset, and then you're like, I don't know what the problem is. I'm just expressing my feelings. Well,
Mhm.
you're not expressing your feelings. You just laid a judgment. You don't even realize it, and now you don't know why you're even into a deeper conflict right now, right? So just that's an issue with it.
Yeah,
The other thing that was probably, I'm guessing, a big aha for you is forget about having the conversation with the outside person. Not having clarity on feelings and thoughts messes us up inside. It messes our own minds up.
absolutely.
And I think I've seen many people that suffer from depression or anxiety when they get this, like,
Mhm.
oh, this difference between a thought and a feeling,
Mhm.
it's a game-changing experience to have that kind of awareness.
Yes.
There's a question. One last thing I'll say on this. We also have a ton of words that we use that
Mm.
are not really, they're not actually feelings. They're really thoughts. Like, I feel manipulated. That
Mhm.
is not a feeling. That is a thought. You think someone's manipulating you. You might feel upset. You might feel sad. You might feel scared. Those are the internal feelings. And
Right.
again, one is a blame evaluative thing. When you say it, it's going to be a trigger, especially to someone that's had trauma, fight, flight, freeze. This is
Mm.
what's happening over and over. It's no wonder we have an epidemic of trauma. We keep doing the same thing over and over without
Mhm.
stopping these patterns.
Indeed, indeed. All right. So I definitely want to acknowledge Dr. Rhonda Blackwell Flanagan, the principal over at Hartsville. Thank you for being here. Beverly said, very true. How willing would the other party be to admit the need or feeling? I can imagine it would make the other person feel vulnerable and maybe uncomfortable.
That's a really good question.
Hmm.
I've been doing this a long time. It's very rare, but I think it has all to do with how you state it, right?
Hmm.
You're not making an emphatic statement that the person is that. It's not a declarative, it's a question. You're leaning in. And it really does, um, if the person is maybe shut down, not willing to admit what the feeling or the need is, you can always give silent empathy. Because
Hmm.
it's not even so much about the words, it's really got more to do with what you're thinking in your head, because I truly believe that the energy of that really does transfer over to the other person, right? So if a person is like, not willing to admit what's going on, and you can stay present to just thinking about needs instead of moving into your own fight, flight, freeze and getting judgmental. They don't even want to admit it. They're not even willing, because that would be judgmental versus, wow, inside, this is what you're thinking. I wonder if they're just feeling super scared right now and they have a need for some safety. Like you pivot there in your head instead of, so there's much to this.
There is. So I think one of the comments in the training that really stuck with me was around when someone says someone make me feel such and such a way.
Mhm.
And so I have really checked that within myself often from that time to this.
Meaning like that nobody can really make anyone feel.
Mhm.
That's all we gotta own that ourselves,
Mhm.
unfortunately, right? So the way that you know that is like the same thing can happen to 2 people and they're gonna experience it differently. They're gonna have different feelings more than likely. So
Yep.
no one can make you feel it's like I know and oh, by the way, there's another little wording thing when I teach people. I try, I don't always, but rather than I feel, you know, um, there's something in me that feels. Because when you say
Mhm.
I feel, it's almost like that's who you are in totality. That's
Mhm.
not what's really going on. What's really going on is there is something inside of me that's feeling this thing, right? So
Mhm.
it again helps you to separate out. We take feelings so seriously.
We do.
The thing about feelings is they change like moment to moment to moment. And again, just reminding people they're just an indicator of a need being met or a need not being met.
Mhm.
That's the real thing you want to be focusing on in the NVC. Um, when you take my class, I usually have people run these sheets off, put them everywhere in your life. And when you notice that you're triggered or upset, grab this sheet. Okay, it's about a need. Can I figure out the need? That's the first thing you want to
Yeah,
start doing. It's about a need.
indeed. I like that. There's something in me that feels
Yeah,
this.
there's something in
Mhm.
me that feels that gives
Mhm.
you some separation from your feeling, which is there you are in some way separated from your feeling.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, in mental health, there's this cognitive triangle that starts with a thought, and then a feeling or emotion, and then a behavior or action.
mm,
And if you want to change the action, you got to change the thought.
mm.
All right.
And you have to even recognize that it's a thought.
Exactly.
I think that's probably why that understanding of what's a feeling versus what's a thought was big for you.
Mm-hmm.
Even start
Mm-hmm.
to recognize, oh, it's a thought. That's all that's
Mm-hmm.
going on here.
Yes. And you can change the thought.
Mm,
Yeah. So, which will more likely, more than likely change the feelings if you change your thought about it.
yes, they're definitely connected.
Mm-hmm.
Sure,
Sure.
for
For sure.
sure.
Sure. Wow. All right. So I did want to give an opportunity. I know you have some poems in the book.
Oh gosh.
I wanted to give an opportunity for you to share a poem or two.
Okay. So the poems in the book mostly are in the appendices.
Hmm.
Just a little bit of background on these. I used to run the Community Connections Restorative Justice program here in Tallahassee for 8 years. I was the coordinator, and a
Hmm.
big part of what we were doing in that program, it's still existing, was to teach and model and live nonviolent communication to the youth in the program. And I think it's a really strong program that is a judgment, but I think the backing it up is observationally, most of the kids that we have been serving are kids ages 13 to 17, most of whom have been referred through the juvenile justice system, right? Kids that have been arrested. And were not happy to be in my program, would come in, with all kinds of attitude, right? Um, and what we ended up having happen is like they wouldn't want to leave us. So our circles, started to grow. Sometimes I think, yeah, Judy Light, you're here. You remember? I think you're still with us. I mean, we would have like 40 people in a room in a circle because the kids would come back as volunteers. They would never want to leave us because it's rare that you can find places in our world where you actually have connection, places where you're seen, heard, and valued without judgment. And in
Hmm.
fact, I used to put that definition up on the board the first day of class with the kids, and I'd say, this is what we're doing here. in 16 weeks, we're going to come back to this. Right now, you're probably not even paying attention to this definition, but in 16 weeks, we're going to come back and I'm going to ask you, did you experience this, right? And we always would. And oftentimes the kids would be like, Miss Cindy, can I get a copy of that definition? You know, I'm like, yes, because you could see that everything we did was intentional right here. And it wasn't just us doing it. I've taught it to you. Now you can go create that as well, right? So that's just a little background on my time with NBC and the kids. So what we would do is teach empathy. A lot of people think they know what empathy is. And empathy and NVC, we used to joke like, we should call it something else. We should call it empathy, because people think they know what empathy is. And in fact, it's actually a process that requires presence and reflection and taking needs guesses, right? If all conflict is about a need, you want to take needs guesses. And when we would meet with the kids outside of class, that's what we would do. We would give empathy to whatever was alive for them in that moment. Or maybe a kid didn't have anything that they wanted empathy for, and then they would give us empathy. So we were totally like leveling the playing field for youth, right? There's nobody better, nobody more. Even when it comes to age years, we're at a level, you know, same level. I might have some more experience that I can impart on you, right? But anyways, all to say that having that level of connection with kids was the greatest gift and the greatest curse all at the same time, because I got to know them so deeply, and all of the kids, and that is an observation, suffered what I would call tremendous trauma. Tremendous. Hundreds of kids over the years, not one. These are not isolated experiences. This is an epidemic of trauma. And I used to think to myself, man, I wish that I could get everybody in the community to sit in circle with these kids the way I'm sitting in circle with them, because I really believe in the goodness of human beings. And I really believe that if people had the proximity and they lived it, they were with it, that there would just be an outpouring of what can we do. So I never wrote these poems for an audience. They were never intended for an audience. These were my own way of processing when I would wake up in the morning, thinking, having these kids heavy on my heart. And I see Judy Light has a comment if you want to bring it up.
Yeah, she said, I do remember going to a graduation and hearing the teens talk about how they transform in timeline of the class inspired me to volunteer. And then to be part of the 16-week course, I got to experience the teens gradually transform. I was blessed to be part of that experience. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Judy.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. And the beautiful thing about that is we really created connection every which way amongst people, all different kinds. And the kids weren't just learning the process. The people in the community got to learn the process as well. So it was, you know, we got double the reward for it. Anyways, these are just things that I wrote to process my own secondary trauma of getting to know the kids so closely. This one is called Shaniqua. And I changed names here for the kids. Shaniqua and Mo and Trey, a family torn apart, had a home passed down from granddad, Shaniqua's daddy. He died, tragedy number 1, but who's counting? Hurricane Hermine blew the roof off, no insurance to rescue. Mold rendered it uninhabitable. Family of 7 homeless, tragedy number 2, but who's counting? New home, Joe Louis Projects, North Side for a South Side family, a toxic concoction, noted by the middle of the night knocks by neighbors, bringing guns, not cake, to welcome them. And Shaniqua's daughter stood her ground. Her trauma response, fight, then arrested. The boys arrested too. They stood guard as friends broke into local school. And Shaniqua, all what was left, sat in her broken home, surrounded by filth her depression couldn't clean. As she pieced together a plan to keep her project home, the eviction notice came due to the arrest, the fight. No place for South Side on North Side. No ear to hear the reasons. Is this tragedy number 4 or 5? Losing count. The boys, Mo, quiet with a grudge towards mom. Trey, superstar smile, roll with the punches. Bedroom was a living room couch. They loved their mama's mac and cheese, loved their mama's cooking. They shared that with me after she was found dead, out of nowhere, wondering if it was natural or done to her. Tragedy 6? Moved in with grandma, couldn't keep track of the number in that house. Grandma seemed to care, or was it the monthly check that came along with the crew helping to feed her addiction? We dropped off food, got the boys summer jobs, all we could think of to do. Within a year, grandma dead too. Mo became a daddy, fought with his love, now doing time. I see Trey at school, still smiling. No one knows tragedies he's been through. We lost count long ago. Shrugged our shoulders out of sorrow and despair, not lack of care. Much easier to turn away than to stare at it all up close and wonder where to start the repair. Ashamed to say, I'm out of here, running back to my safe white world with my first world problems. And
Mm,
Shaniqua rolls over in her grave for the family she couldn't save.
wow. Heavy, heavy, heavy.
Yeah, they're all pretty heavy in the back of the book.
Mm,
But it's my way of allowing people to sit in circle with those kids. Like, that's why I put them there. I was like, this is my way of letting people have a window. It's not just a few, it's an epidemic.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the youth that I was working with, they had the extreme, adverse child experience 10s, that's the highest. Like, most of those kids, and these are the kids that are in our schools, and most of the adults don't even know the stuff's going down for them. And then you wonder why they can't show up and read and write and do all, like, study, like, do the
Right.
things, like, if you don't have your emotional safety in place, like,
Mm-hmm.
no sense doing anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heavy, heavy, heavy. So I see we have Pastor Wanda Jordan on with us. Thank you for being here. And her response is wow. So for those of you who are also viewing, if you feel comfortable enough to share your thoughts about what you just heard, please do so in the comments. We would like to hear from you. Um, uh, Pastor Wanda said, we have so few spaces and people who can hold their stuff.
It's true.
Hmm.
It's true. And even people that have really good intentions don't have the skill,
Mm,
because I think a lot of times, especially with kids, we pivot to those other conversational responses. We
mm,
pivot to giving advice. We pivot to relating about how it was for us. We pivot to all those things. And what in nonviolent communication, you learn to make sure that that kid is seen, heard, and valued without judgment. So you hold on all those other conversational responses. You might give advice eventually, but first making sure that kid is fully heard and able to process and connect to the needs that are alive for them. This is what's missing, even for people that have all the best intentions of working with youth.
yeah. Hmm. Mm, 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 mm.
Mm.
Yeah. I am. It just. It hurts my heart to hear.
Yeah, I mean, and usually when I share it, um, when I share poems, I usually will share one or two. I can
Hmm.
tell, I'll tell people, like, I'm sorry that it hurts, and I'm not sorry that it hurts.
Hmm.
I'm sorry that it hurts, and I'm not sorry that it hurts, because I want everyone to have an awareness
Yeah.
and then do whatever is your part. We all have different gifts. Whatever's your part, like to get up close to it in some way. To my part at this point is to try to have as many people know about nonviolent communication and learn it and apply it and commit to it, because I really do believe that it is the way to interrupt the trauma that is epidemic.
Indeed. 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 So again, I'm going to attempt to get the viewers involved. Um, you know, we really only have kind of scratched the surface tonight in terms of what nonviolent communication is and does. It really is all about connection and empathy and being seen, valued, and heard without judgment. And I hope that is really kind of, you're getting just a sense of that through our conversation tonight. But I'm kind of curious if you all are intrigued by this and if you want to know more, if you're interested in learning more, wanting more, if you would just let us know in the comments by giving us a thumbs up or a yes, or let us know, because I'm just really curious. We've talked about needs and feelings and thoughts and fight, flight, or freeze, and just the trauma that is associated with these daily lives. So my mom just asked, where is this taught?
I'm so glad you asked that, because we never even said that.
Mhm.
I need to get a little better about marketing this, for real. So I have a company now called the Bigbie Method. I am attempting to scale it up. It is online. You can look up, I think you're going to put it on the screen here, www.thebigbie Method. We have an intro class that is open enrollment for people that want to come in. It's 8 weeks, and in the 8 weeks, it's an hour of self-paced content. So basically an hour of videos with me explaining content that you consume on your own time during the week. And then we have a 75-minute session that you come into and you're practicing the processes, because it's not an intellectual, like I can share with you the concepts, but it's a process. So you have to be in it to have it come alive for you. So
Mm.
that 75 minutes is very key. And even with that, this is where I might scare people away, but I'm just going to be honest. Like, when you come into the class, I usually say you start out and you are unconsciously unskilled. And
Mm.
that goes for even people that think they have really good communication skills, have a lot of degrees behind their names. I think most of the time people come in and they're like, wow, like I didn't even know there was this thing that I could really learn that can actually help you replicate connection no matter what situation. Like
Right.
right, there's a template here. And then after 8 weeks, you're almost in a worse place, because now you're at what I would call consciously unskilled. Now you know that there's this thing, you're wowed by it, but you're still having a hard time applying it. But so we have set up what's called the empathy gym, the Bigbie Method empathy gym, which you get to go through while you're in the 8 weeks. You're actually in the empathy gym. That's the practice part of it. But then when you're done, you can continue on. So you can continue to practice, because it's similar to a spiritual practice or going to work out at the gym, right? Like the results come when you're staying in the game. It's the same exact thing here. You cannot expect to have a different response, to override that fight, flight, freeze response, until you've put down new, neural networks, connections in your brain. That takes time to do that. So you can check us out at the Bigbie Method. Thanks, Nicole's got it up there.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's where you can learn all about the program and what we're doing. And we are also doing it we have 6 different cohorts right now going for Leon County schools. Like I said, Success Academy is fully bought in the next year. I can't wait to see their data in the next year, because I think it's going to really show a whole lot. And we're also working with some other districts and schools. So, but those are contracts with schools. Individuals can come in and they can also sign up on their own.
Mhm. Okay, so definitely check out the website. It is definitely worth looking into and participating in. I'm telling you, I've also been a part of the empathy gym, and like she said, it is a workout. I mean, you really are. Um, how do I want to say? You really are deprogramming and reprogramming your mind in terms of communicating in this way. And so but it takes practice. It's not something that you're going to get overnight. Even after being in the class for 8 weeks, you've got to practice it and make a conscious effort to work towards this. So again, I'm so glad that you join me tonight to talk about this. My friend Beverly said, "What a great topic. Thanks for sharing." Beverly, oh, Miss Jeanette, she said, "I know a 53-year-old who has lived with childhood trauma, hates family members, have very friends existing on negative feelings."
Mm.
Okay. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's epidemic.
Yeah.
It's so many people with so much pain.
Mhm.
Yes. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, Dr. Sam Carter is on. Thank you for being here. Beverly Toombs said every kid needs an adult who sees and hears them and not who just lectures them. This is important stuff for the kids and adults who desire to be there for them. I'm interested. Wonderful, Beverly.
Every kid also needs an adult that when a kid says F you to you, doesn't respond with fight back, and that
Mm,
they have an understanding that it's a need
yeah.
and pivots in that way. That's how you keep a kid from escalating and being suspended and then in our DJJ system.
Hmm. Indeed. Judy, learning MVC is so valuable. Listening to your poem brought tears to my eyes as I remember connecting with so many of the teens who shared with me what they were dealing with. Yes, there is need for this in our families, relationships, schools, communities, world. And I have experienced making a positive difference. Yes. Thank you, Judy, for sharing that. Indeed. Wow. So Sam said it's rough.
Mhm,
It's rough. It's rough. It's rough. But I see MVC as a light
mhm.
in the midst of the darkness. And
Right.
so I highly recommend it for everybody. I do.
I don't
I,
have the answer to so much of it, but I know that this is definitely a contributing tool like this. You
Mhm.
know, this is something that I can give that I really know makes a difference.
Yeah, for sure. Pastor Wana wants to know, is this a cousin of informed trauma practices?
Well, I actually think it takes another level up because it's more than informed, right? It's actually like on the hand responsive. It's telling people like when you're informed, you're informed that there's trauma that's happening, but many of us don't know, okay, what do we do now that we're informed? This actually gives you what to do. It allows you to recognize it and have different things to do so that you have a different kind of a response. Good
Indeed.
question. Really good question.
Yes. So my mom said everyone needs this.
It's true. You know, as I have this business, it's like people are like, you have to really hone in on your market. I'm like, it's really hard because everywhere you go, there's conflict and trauma, and like it's everywhere. It's in our businesses, our organizations, our schools, our homes. It's everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is tough. It's for everyone, for sure. Judy said, "Amen, mom." Indeed, indeed. All right. So you all have the website. So definitely check her out. You're also on social media as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
Yes.
I'm on social media. I'm on all the different things we're supposed to be on these
Yeah.
days to get people to see us. Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. But definitely connect. And the book, where can folks get the book?
Oh, Amazon. You
Mhm.
can get it on Amazon. Just look up my link to Mildred, and yeah, it's really special because it's to me it's the story of my own family's trauma, how it
Mm,
was handed down. So I've heard a lot of good feedback about people enjoy it because it's personal narrative along with the science. It's kind
yeah.
of interwoven
Mm,
together there. And when I wrote it, I really I had no idea like is anybody going to care about like my what's in my head, you know?
mhm,
Or the last chapter is really all about my mom's last month on Earth, which came out of nowhere. We my mom came here last year, April 1st, not last year, the year before.
mhm.
Time's moving already like that. April 1st with a thing in her neck. She died May 5th.
Oh, wow.
It was cancer that had we had no idea. She literally like had a month. And like I said, when she was dying, she asked me to write this book because
Mhm,
she had seen like the changes in our own family
mhm,
over time, how we were able to interrupt and stop the same patterns that had been handed down, generation to generation
Yeah.
because of my work with NVC. And my mom and I were able to have so many real healing conversations where people were seen, heard, and valued without judgment. And that I have had so much peace in my mom's passing. It's bizarre. And I really think it's because we had closure thanks to
Yeah.
NVC. Yeah.
Nice.
So Amazon, read the book. The last chapter is it's hard.
Yeah. Well, I have the book on Kindle, so I am making my way through it. But thank you for this work. Judy says, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to all who showed up here. Let's keep spreading the word and the teachings. Absolutely, Judy. Absolutely.
Judy.
So, yes. Okay, Miss Jeanette said, title of book, please. All right, I need to type it in the comments. So,
My
it
link to
is
Mildred,
my link to Mildred.
and that it's interrupting the epidemic of trauma via nonviolent communication. If you want to put all that on it. If you just put in my link to Mildred, I think you'll find it. I don't think there's any other link to Mildred out there that I know of.
Right. All right, I'm gonna put that in the comments so folks can have it, but you can find it on Amazon. All right, Miss Jeanette, and we'll get you squared away in just a minute. There you go. All right, cool. All right, but you can also go to the website. Is the link to the book in the website? On the website?
The website, the book has its own website, which is my link to
Oh,
Mildred.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Susan says she just found it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Very good.
I
Very
also have a podcast if people are interested in just listening and learning a little bit more. It's called, you could put this in there too. It's called NVC with Dr. B.
okay.
It's all about connection, NVC with Dr. B. And they're short. They're like 10, 15 minutes at the most, but they give a lot of good information and it's fun, I think. We have I think there's like 140 episodes or something like that by now.
Wow.
But I would recommend start at the beginning because I give a lot of the foundations of NVC in the podcast.
Okay. So another opportunity to get a deeper understanding about NVC and maybe put some of it into practice.
I
Yeah.
know my mom, she started listening to my podcast and I started seeing all kinds of changes in the way she was responding. It was helpful. So I
Okay.
do think you can learn from it.
Good. Good deal. Good deal. Well, again, I gotta thank you for your time, for your work, for just doing gifting us with this. I'll put it like that, gifting us with this because this is truly a gift. It really is. And so, your methods, your tenacity and persistence, especially with the young people, is second to none. So really, really appreciate it. I can't say enough about it. I need to get more into the empathy gym, and I will, as time permits. But I have really enjoyed this work and think it's very important.
Well, I think you understand that when you are asked or led or called to do something, that's what you do, right? I mean,
Mhm,
it's just
mhm.
that's how it's been for me, honestly.
Yeah.
That really is how it's been. I'm getting up there in age, getting up there. I'd
There
like to
we
see this as
go.
I'd like to see this as scaled up as possible. That's really the dream.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you. So thank you for letting me be here and share because, I think this is the way for people to know is just by
Mm,
having conversations, like you said, on your little song coming in here,
mhm,
right? It's
mhm.
about letting people have conversations.
Yep, indeed, indeed. Well, thank you, viewers, for joining us. Again, check out uh, the bigbiemethod.com for more information about what Dr. B has going on. She has a podcast. She has the book. So a number of ways for you to, keep up with her and find out what's happening. And again, I highly recommend the class and the empathy gym. So for those of you who are catching the replay, definitely check this out. So we got a few more people chiming in. My good friend Sharice, she said good information. She's going to check out the replay because she's just joining us. Reverend Wana, she said, found the podcast. Thank you for sharing your knowledge to help us connect. Yes, wonderful. Thank you. All right, good people. Well, for those of you, again, who are new to the broadcast, Conversations with Nicole, I invite you to subscribe. We're on Mondays and Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, and the focus is primarily mental health in Black and Brown communities. But with Mindset Monday and Wellness Wednesdays, you never know what we're going to talk about, to be quite honest. Excuse me, because those are such broad topics, but I think NVC definitely lines up with all of that. So again, thank you. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.